Welcome to uBook channel. Read and listen to the greatest stories that mankind has ever told. From Iliad to Covid Terror, and other famous classics. Enjoy the best world literatures throughout history.
Covid Terror. Copyright 2021 by Gerry de Cadiz. All rights reserved. A unified Al-Qaeda and Islamic State took advantage of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic in reinvigorating its jihadist cause for dominance and the re-establishment of a caliphate. World Health Organization Director General, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, said, "A virus is more powerful in creating political, economic, and social upheaval than any terrorist attack. Can have more powerful consequences than any terrorist action."
Covid Terror. Chapter 13.
Khalifa Mansion, Vero Beach, Florida. February 11, 2020. A coded message confirmed that a $1.5 million was credited to the numbered bank account in Switzerland of Louise Luthwaite. A smile from Yusuf, when she showed him the text, means that he also got the contracted $1 million payment. It was only one of the common jobs they have to take. It may be repulsive to a lot of people, but every time she saw a person deemed to be an enemy of Islam, she became enthusiastic. Killing is not that hard, if you put your mind and heart to it. She got that idea as she was growing in a house, where her father was still an active British Army soldier, who served in the 9th 12th Royal Lancers. As a child, she was familiar with the brutality of the Irish Republican Army, which continually harass and brutalize the neighbourhood in Northern Ireland. The breaking point was the loss of her loving husband, and the subsequent difficulty in bringing up their 14-month-old son, and delivering from her womb an 8-month-old daughter. It became a national sensation that on July 7, 2005, Jermaine Lindsay blew himself up on a train traveling between King's Cross and Russell Square tube stations, killing 26 civilians in his suicide attack. In the immediate aftermath of her husband's bombings, Louise was placed in a police-safe house, after her home was firebombed. With her conversion to Islam and association with the London bombing ringleader Mohammed Siddiq Khan, it was easy to tread the fundamentalist line. She ultimately ended up in Kenya, joining the Mombasa cell of the Al-Shabaab, a jihadist fundamentalist group based in East Africa. Agents from the Counter-Terrorism Command of London's Metropolitan Police Service travelled to Nairobi and attempted to arrest her. When a hefty offer of hard currency from the disgraced PLA general came in, she decided to lay low, and accept a job in China as Sharifia Barayeva. It's a silent agreement between the two of them, that they will avoid talking of their previous missions. The only exception is when there's a subsequent related operation. Was the beheading of General Clark necessary? She may be considered brutal by international governments, but only when it's really indispensable. That should serve as a warning to whoever sent that paper to the general. Yusuf rationalized. Beheading, in the context of war, is justified by the Quran in Surah chapter 8 verse 12. When the Lord inspired the angels, saying, "I am with you. So make those who believe stand firm. I will throw fear into the hearts of those who disbelieve. Then smite the necks and smite of them each finger." He is a genuine jihadist. Sow fear into the enemy's mind to win their hearts. He recalled the instruction of an ISIL warrior who visited China in 2015, Mohammed Imwaza. Initially called Jihadi John by the press, the British Kuwaiti militant was responsible for several beheadings of a number of ISIL captives in 2014 and 2015. The gruesome videos sent to heads of state in Western countries caused fear and irresolute strategies in their war against jihadist forces. I looked at him as a true warrior of Allah. His is not only for religious fervor, but also of maltreatment in the hands of Donbass separatists. I see. Louise is not sold out yet with the ISIL style of execution. But she will not make any fuss about it? After the Shenandoah Valley operation, they stayed indoor for days in this exclusive property of the Khalifa. The media was full of stories of the diabolic assassination of Major General Friedrich Clark. The bodyguard met also a grisly end. 2 silent shots to the heart and head instantly killed Sergeant Leroy. On the way back after murdering the general, the male assailant cautiously dismembered the soldier's corpse, with the limbs thrown in the 4 directions of the room, and the head guarding the front door of the mansion. Chameleon was originally called by the Greeks as ground lion. According to National Geographic, chameleons are distinguished by their zygodactylous feet, their very extensive, highly modified, rapidly extrudable tongues, their swaying gait, and crests or horns on their brow and snout. Most species, the larger ones in particular, also have a prehensile tail. The animal's skin has a superficial layer which contains pigments, and under the layer are cells with guanine crystals. A chameleon can change its color by changing the space between the crystals, that altered the wavelength of light being reflected on the skin. The color change is the reptile's way of surviving the harsh environment, through camouflage to avoid predators or go nearer to a prey. It is also commonly used in social signaling, and in reactions to temperature and other conditions of the place. Ahmed was scrutinizing a Trioceros jacksonii, a species introduced in California in the 1970s from Kenyan poachers. With its characteristically 3 brown horns, this chameleon is reminiscent of the ceratopsid dinosaur genus, Triceratops. The chameleon reminds him of Harba. In fact, his martyred spiritual advisor Sheikh Abd al-Rahman was the first to suggest the label, using the reptile's Arabic name and characteristics to describe the operational plan. Remnants of his ferocious and well-disciplined fighters in the Martyrs Brigade in Iraq pinned a crystal in their rifle butts to mimic the chameleon's pigment, and honor the slain tribal leader and military commander. Similar to a chameleon blending in with the environment, he had successfully transcended, from being the Western country's feared adversary Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, to an ordinary but very wealthy businessman, using an unknown and untraceable birth name. For more than a decade, Plan Harba was put into oblivion. The scrupulous planning paid off, with the Western intelligence agency's acceptance of the elimination of the al-Zarqawi menace, in the 2006 bomb raid in Hibhib, Iraq. His resurgence in another persona was not even given with a second look. Everything is going well when all of a sudden, a single piece of evidence surfaced. Somebody in the CIA had surmised a lead, and attempted to have it validated by the U.S. Army Deputy Chief of Staff for Research and Development. The folded paper from the pocket of Major General Friedrich Clark will tear down everything that he had founded. It's not only incriminating to his person, and the loss of all his properties. It will also have a domino effect, leading to the capture and ensuing deaths of his trusted lieutenants and fighters. The death of the Pentagon official was necessary. His association with him was based purely on business interest, and nothing else. His knowledge of the Khalifa's true personal background nullified whatever interactions they may have before. There should be nothing along the way that will compromise the operationalization of a newly hatched project. Although it seems very complicated from the start, but he is confident that the arrival of his protege, Amira Siddiqui, will finally accomplish what previous jihadist leaders, and his predecessors, have tried before but failed. Harba will be the foundation of the newly conceptualized project, originally proposed by a dead PLA general. The COVID-19 pandemic gave him the opportunity to put into motion a promising endeavor that would provide him the leverage against his nemesis, the United Nations. Very soon, he can dictate his terms and conditions. Even without marching to battle, for a recognition by the family of states of his caliphate in those areas under his martial influence, perhaps, even including the United States of America. The Emir's deputy commander Abdul Najib had no choice but to break the bad news. To avoid a pointless exposure that will invite a preemptive reaction from the US-led coalition, he has to stop the release of a propaganda video by some ill-advised commanders in Iraq. It's not yet the proper time, he explained to the Emir. It's been a year that the ISIL had its last major battle. The video that runs nearly an hour shows jihadist fighters escalating terror attacks in Iraq and elsewhere, demonstrating a variety of operations, such as deadly attacks by rockets or improvised explosive devices, and ambushes. As operations officer and primary strategist in the jihadist organization, one thing that Abdul wanted to avoid is for the Western powers to get an idea that the ISIS is back again on its feet. He cited several reports pertaining to the group's existence. A study from the War Studies University in Warsaw provides a glaring eventuality that must be kept in the shadow for the time being. This terrorist organization ISIS, whose existence does not depend on having a territory or not, has proved its resilience and amazing adaptable capabilities. Moreover, to a disbelief of many American decision-makers, it does not seem to be retreating from a battlefield, but rather restructuring and getting ready to the next phase of the conflict. Prime Minister Masroor Barzani of Iraqi Kurdistan stated in an interview with The Atlantic magazine, that ISIS not only does exist, but is even more capable to fight now than years ago. ISIS is still very much intact. Yes, they have lost much of their leadership. They have lost many of their capable men. But they've also managed to gain more experience and to recruit more people around them. So they should not be taken lightly. The Pentagon's lead inspector general revealed in a report in the first months of 2020 that despite of a territorial victory over ISIS, they continue information warfare and recruitment of followers in a virtual world. ISIS has continued to disseminate its propaganda on Twitter, Facebook, and Telegram, and U.S. Central Command reported that this propaganda revolved around two main themes: ISIS's persistence in the face of adversity, and retaliation through a global insurgency. The UN monitoring team's report leaves no doubts as for ISIS vitality. It also addresses an issue of the security vacuum that developed after a recent partial withdrawal of U.S. forces. Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, ISIL, following its loss of territory, has begun to reassert itself in both the Syrian Arab Republic and Iraq, mounting increasingly bold insurgent attacks, calling and planning for the breakout of ISIL fighters in detention facilities, and exploiting weaknesses in the security environment of both countries. CNN reported that the Medir Ummat Intelligence and Terrorism Information Center, Spotlight on Global Jihad portal informs, especially in the Euphrates Valley, the Islamic State has been taking advantage of the current COVID epidemic, and it is being actively involved in the operations against Syria, an Arab army and Syrian Democratic Forces. A range of fighting techniques used seems to be quite wide: IEDs, shooting attacks, targeted killings, ambushes and attacks against military camps. Abdul vehemently opined that it should be the weaknesses of jihadist forces that the press must pay attention to. Ahmed agreed. For now, we should avoid showing our potency. From time to time, we better run online how Baghdad was lost. Let the Crusaders think that we're done for good.
Abdul Najib was the last to leave the battlefront. Along with his loyal fighters, they volunteered to serve for a rearguard action to the group of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi escaping through the tunnels on the southwestern cliffs of Jabal Baghdad. On the third week of March 2019, the ISIL's encampment at Baghdad's Fakhani in Deir-ez-Zor province was captured. It was the last populated and territorial stronghold of the group in Syria since its emergence in 2014. Al-Baghdadi did the most practical thing to do in this type of conflict. He ordered the evacuation of 34,000 civilians, and the surrender of 29,600 wounded militants and their families to the Syrian Democratic Forces, so they can fight another day. Abdul coordinated the few pockets of resistance along the shores of the Euphrates River, where intermittent clashes continued, with resisting ISIL fighters trapped between the captured camp and the river. There was that feeling of déjà vu, when he did the same thing in evacuating the remnants of his fighters to safety, across Lake Lanao from pursuing troops of the Philippines Special Operations Group, in the Battle of Maraywai in 2017. The Battle of Baghuz-Fokani that begun in February 9, 2019, was an offensive by the SDF and assisted by airstrikes, artillery, and special forces personnel from the US-led coalition of British, French, Iraqi and Syrian militaries, known as Combined Joint Task Force. Operation Inherent Resolve. Composing of a series of ground assaults, the battle was part of the Deir ez-Zor campaign of the Syrian civil war. In the final roster after the Baghuz battle, the ISIL suffered with more than 5,000 fighters and 1,306 militants killed in action, while about 520 were captured in operations. On the other hand, the SDF and coalition forces claimed that their casualties were only 11 dead and 61 injured troopers.
Our people must know rather the martyrdom of those fighters in Baghuz-Fokani. Their demise will be avenged very soon. The Khalifa declared with a firm resolve. He opened the Quran and read chapter 5, verse 95. God will take vengeance on him, God is almighty, vengeful. Consider it urgent to review a plan Harba. Professor Sean Gabriel Fitzgerald is mystified with the blue scribbling. He found a black envelope inserted in a King James Bible, inside the general's drawer. This message might be the cause of the general's murder. And whoever sent it from Langley, if indeed it came from the CIA, knew something about Harba. Anything you heard from him, something outside from routine? Sage asked Captain Kristen Haver. Nothing unusual. Despite her tough training in the Rangers School, and a seasoned warrior herself, Kristen was a little bit shaken upon hearing the news, on what happened to General Clark. Sage, also known as Agent Merks in the company, is getting back to his groove as an intelligence analyst. The last time you had a talk with him, did he mention anything subtle, or about an unexpected appointment? None that I can recall. She showed him the general's planner and calendar. His coming back to Shenandoah Valley was an arranged leave, in preparation for the homecoming of his family from a Caribbean vacation. The attack chopper pilot and ranger specialist continued. His son dropped by this office a week ago. Lieutenant Colonel Siegfried Clark of the USSF, signified to having some days off for a home visit. In his training as an analyst, they were taught that a simple message may not be the real message at all. That scribbling can be texted anytime to the general, somebody need not take all the effort to have it delivered to the Pentagon in a sealed envelope. Tracing through the delivery receipt had shown that it was mailed from Langley, Virginia. He knows what the "for your eyes only" mean. It could be that the sheet he's holding now is just the imprimatur to another message. Did you happen to see what's inside this envelope? He felt his blood is getting hot out of frustration. Nope. It was opened by the general in his desk, and I just saw him taking out 2 sheets of paper. Bam. The loud, startling sound of his palm on the table almost made the captain jump to her feet. What did you say, too? He took a stride towards her. Are you sure there were 2 papers inside this envelope? That's right. His face was expressionless when he read the first one. She recalled that when General Clark unfolded the second paper, his face was ashen. His hands almost shook. Standing up and going to the window, he stared into the distance. Agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation informed him that the only lead they have on the case was the order of Major General Friedrich Clark for Professor Sean Gabriel Fitzgerald to be recalled back to the States for a special mission. Based on forensic result of the corpse, the time that the general called the night duty staff in his office is very near to the estimated time of his death. Sage lost no time. It's just a 2.5 hours travel from the Pentagon to the Clark Mansion in Virginia. Along the way, he kept pondering the circumstances surrounding the order of the CIA to investigate the mysterious murder of an army general in his residence in the Shenandoah Valley.
It just came in last night via satellite. Professor Ryoko Byakuran handed him a piece of paper, with a clear directive from the Central Intelligence Agency, for him to report back to the US in the first flight upon receipt of this order. The rector had approved your leave for a week, or when the job is done. After reading the memo, Sage smiled. Thanks boss, for the effort. The CIA station chief in Japan handed him also an envelope, with a United Airlines direct flight ticket from Tokyo to Washington, D.C., along with his exit visa. You don't have to miss your kids. I won't let them play the fire when you're not around. A pleased colleague jibed at him, referring to his doctorate students at the United Nations University. Upon arrival at the Washington Dulles International Airport, he proceeded immediately to the George Bush Center for Intelligence for a mission briefing. His case officer recommended that he commence the investigation at the office of the U.S. Army Deputy Chief of Staff for Research and Development. He might be able to pick up some tidbits to connect the dots.
His final instruction to me is to place in his table my action of his order to the Army's Personnel Bureau by mid-morning. Those were the only words that the night duty officer could share to him, with the Pentagon switchboard surveillance record confirming it. The officer's action memo for the general was properly noted with time, place, and persons involved in the activity. Its outcome was his emergency recall to the United States. There's nothing substantial from the general's office, as a proof that would point to the murderers. The blue scribbling was sent already to the CIA and FBI for forensic handwriting analysis. The black envelope never showed any fingerprint except that of the receiver's, not unusual if it's handled with a gloved hand. The only hard evidence is the missing second copy from the envelope. With Kristen's help, they combed thoroughly the general's office, even including table and chairs crevices, as well as flipping through books, magazines, and folders. The mysterious paper is nowhere to be found. It has to be with General Clark the last time he left the Pentagon. His extensive training and experiences in the intelligence community, in handling documentary evidences, assured Sage of the probability. Shaking his head in self-doubt, he can guess that whatever kind of paper it is, that caused the assassination of a two-star general in the U.S. Army, have already been lost to thin air. The 19th-century neoclassical mansion still evokes magnificence and power, amidst the natural beauty and impressive expanse of the Clark estate. The pre-Civil War edifice signify the rich heritage of the place, and the prominence of people who shaped the history of this nation. The last time Sage set foot on this property, it was a reunion party of the 75th Ranger Regiment sponsored by its commanding officer, Colonel Frederick Clark. Year 2011 marked the official withdrawal of U.S. troops from Iraq, and Army servicemen finally went home to their families.
It was a starry June evening, the cold breeze providing a very pleasant atmosphere to the partygoers. The ladies were in their best socialite dresses and sparkling accessories, while the officers proudly displayed hard-earned medals on their green Class A service uniforms, paired with their tan beret with regimental beret flash, the emblem signifying membership to an elite Special Operations Force. That is a combat deployable unit in the U.S. Army Special Operations Command. With the order for demobilization and seemingly an end to the Iraq War, everybody was in the best of spirit. By authorization of Congress, President George W. Bush, along with its allies the United Kingdom and several coalition forces, launched a military attack against Iraq on March 20, 2003, in a series of bombing campaign. As the US-led coalition forces swept through the country, Iraqi forces were quickly overwhelmed, due to poor war materiel and lack of leadership. The invasion resulted to the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, and the collapse of the Ba'athist government. By December of that year, the Iraqi leader was captured during Operation Red Dawn, and executed by hanging 3 years later. Saddam's ouster created a power vacuum, and led to widespread civil war between Shias and Sunnis, as well as a lengthy insurgency against coalition forces. It was aggravated by the mismanagement of the coalition provisional authority in the country, that gave rise to atrocities of violent insurgent groups, which were supported by Al-Qaeda. The Iraq War transposed into a protracted armed conflict, and a vicious insurgency to oppose the occupying forces, and the post-invasion Iraqi government. It was reported in foreign media, that in the first 4 years of conflict, an estimated 1 million Iraqis were killed. To recoup its initial gain of policing the Middle East, the United States responded with a buildup of 170,000 troops in 2007, to enable coalition forces a greater control of Baghdad's government and military. By 2008, the U.S. President agreed to a withdrawal of all American combat troops from Iraq. Colonel Clark signaled Sage to join him in the terrace, a little apart from the gathering. That decoration shines the brightest in this crowd. The colonel pointed at Sage's Congressional Medal of Honor. Both men knew the true story behind this award. It was that noble courage and initiative to stand fast, and fought bravely against numerically superior ISIS combatants, that made them survive the war. This belongs to all heroic souls of the regiment. It was such a rush. The junior officer downplayed the deadliness of that intense battle they've been through in the suburbs of Mosul. I have to say this to you. We are not celebrating the end of the war. His CO tapped him in the shoulder like a father that he is. Why is that so, Colonel? As far as he knows, Uncle Sam is a little bit tired of dragging its feet in the hot dunes of Middle East. They went inside to the study. In a wooden cabinet, Colonel Clark pulled a June 2006 edition of several international newspapers. He laid the publications in a long table, and displayed prominently a common article, The Death of Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. A story 5 years ago seems stale, that's good only for historical treatises. Don't ever believe what the big guys in the White House and Pentagon top brass are saying. You were there. Shouldn't we? That goner tried to catch 2 500-pound bombs on his safe house in Hib-Hib. The airborne rangers that Captain Fitzgerald was commanding at that time were the first coalition forces to arrive on the scene. That's the Wahasha. An Iraqi policeman pointed to a man on a stretcher. Government soldiers refer to al-Zarqawi as beast. But Sage could see a complete though lifeless body and a face with blood markings, as if somebody put the red pigment on purpose. This should not be the composure of one who's been bombed, if compared to the wreckage and total devastation around. You've seen it. You may have some bruises with an M67. But the accurate and sadistic GBU-12 and GBU-38 will definitely pulverize you in a second on the spot. Of course, Sage believed it. There were stories of someone surviving a fragmentation grenade, but not from a half-ton 21st century digitally guided bomb. Using a pencil, his CO encircled the common story in all papers. A June 12 story of the Associated Press entitled, Zarqawi Autopsy Over, Results Withheld, raised questions then answers. The press pointed out that everybody was saying that a fingerprint and DNA tests were done, but nobody forwarded any of its results. So, what does it really mean, sir? Sage had known this man to be highly scholarly. Commanding the 75th Ranger Regiment requires a top-notch competence in military intelligence. Colonel Clark folded back the newspapers, placed it carefully inside the cabinet, and loudly swore. He may have the looks, and all supporting cast with his demise, but for me, it means that fucking Sinofovich was a planted imposter, who happily offered his martyrdom to Allah.
A black and yellow police line cordon set up by the county sheriff looks disgustingly at odds to the tranquility of the place. He learned from the FBI that Madam Clark and her daughter will be staying at their villa in Milwaukee. After an offer by the sheriff's deputy to accompany him inside was turned down by Sage, no one bothered him anymore. Besides, the local authorities were given a copy of his authorization as an investigator by the CIA. The rooms were cleaned thoroughly by the Army's General Services Office, after the crime detectives completed their jobs. He went to General Clark's study. Everything looked as it was when he was here in 2011. Except for an August 7, 2015 edition of the National Geographic, and a copy of a June 12, 2006 issue of Washington Post folded crosswise, with a pencil whose point rests to an article entitled, "Change of Course." These papers would gather dust as time goes by, but this one seems to have been placed neatly on the table, just recently. The general is known to be a history buff, but for Sage, who was with him in so many mind-boggling missions, the man wanted to tell him something through these objects. He read the Post article written by Dan Frumkin. A paragraph caught his attention. But the president is riding high for the moment on two bits of unqualifiedly good news: the death of Al-Qaeda leader Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, and the formation of a new government in Iraq, while overall facing a public overwhelmingly critical of his decision-making, and adamant that U.S. troops should start coming home. The phrase "unqualifiedly good news," the death of Al-Qaeda leader Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, has been illegibly underlined, not by a pencil but perhaps by a fingernail. Obviously, the general had known that he's working now for the CIA. The emergency calls for him to go back to the US for a special mission may have something to do with the al-Zarqawi case. Pointing a penlight on the paper, he saw that another nail mark runs above the letters, "unqualified." With the highlighted words in this article, the general is ordering him to investigate about the unqualified death of the Al-Qaeda leader. He looked at the magazine. It hit him right away. The cover page features a broad picture of a creature that can change its skin color to adapt to its environmental condition. The caption reads, "Chameleon colors reflect their emotions. Unqualified death, Zarqawi, chameleon. There's the clue." Sage exclaimed to himself. Financial privacy is the most valued asset of banks in Switzerland. This is a conditional agreement between a bank and its clients, that all foregoing activities remain secure, confidential, and private. Almost all banking secrecy standards prohibit the disclosure of client information to third parties without consent or an accepted criminal complaint. Notably, in this country, additional privacy is provided to qualified clienteles through a numbered bank account. In the client's lounge of Credit Suisse, Amira Siddiqui patiently waited, while browsing through a brochure of the Tourist Information Office. This is the first time she visited this beautiful city, located at the northwestern tip of Lake Zurich. Originally called Turicum, it was founded by the Romans in 15 BC. In the Middle Ages, the city gained an independent and privileged status of imperial immediacy, and became a center of the Protestant Reformation in 1519. "When I'm done with my apprenticeship and did some local practice, I will apply for residency in Geneva." Her son laid out his plan of migrating to Europe, as they were dining in Islamabad's Cadiz Gallery Cafe. That was in 2016, when she's been repatriated back to Pakistan, after her incarceration in the US due to the Ghazni affair. Ahmed Siddiqui graduated his law studies from the University of Punjab, and currently in practice as a solicitor pleader of the government. Of all her children, it was Ahmed who experienced all the persecutions and hardships that she'd been through, while trying to evade and later on captured, then illegally detained, by the US Special Forces in 2008. She returned the brochure back to its rack. If ever she finished this project with the Khalifa, she would really relocate here. Switzerland is an immigrant-friendly country, with the high standards of living, political neutrality, world-class infrastructure, and beautiful landscape. Perhaps, she would go on with this new masquerade. With her credentials, she could even volunteer as a neuroscientist and research fellow at the WHO headquarters, barely a 3-hour drive from here. "Dr. Grimwood, please follow me." A petite staff ushered her to the executive office of the bank's accounts officer. A mid-40s gentleman extended his hand in greetings. "It's a pleasure to serve your financial needs, gnädige Frau. Das Vergnügen liegt bei mir." Ellie has to forget her miserable past for the time being. At the moment, she's a gifted polyglot, and German is one of the languages she likes. The banker grinned in appreciation. "I understand you'll be opening an account with us. What could it be?" "As a researcher, I usually go around the world. So, I guess I might as well have a private account for receiving salary and daily banking, and managing it online and through mobile transactions." Ellie is familiar with the Swiss anti-money laundering law. So, she presented the documents required by the bank as a non-resident, along with additional papers to validate her credentials. These include the authenticated copy of her passport, the Nevada driver's license and the employment ID. "I've seen in UN Web TV, that this company is one of those highly endorsed by the WHO, to undertake the effort of coming up with a vaccine for COVID-19. He said in awe. The manager took a good time reading the certification, of her being a principal researcher in a US-based pharmaceutical laboratory. Ellie said a point of inquiry. "Is it possible to have a savings account, at the same time, another current account under the same name?" "That can be done, madam. Our savings account pays a competitive interest rate without incurring account management fee. If you desire, you can also pursue attractive returns with our investment fund savings plans. I'll have the savings in Kuwaiti dinar. I will talk with your fund manager when I decide to invest later. The current account should be in US dollar. She expects of making and accepting payments denominated in the other currency, without having to actually buy or sell it." "Very well, Dr. Grimwood. We'll process your papers within 24 hours. The bank's accounts officer shook her hand to seal the transaction. He bid her good luck as she's about to go out from the room. "For the meantime, enjoy your stay in the land of milk and honey." "I will enjoy this panoramic city, that's for sure," Ellie thought. They said that Zurich is one of the most livable cities in the planet. Switzerland is a haven for people like her who needs to protect an asset, and kept the account remained confidential. In a matter of days, she'll be more than $100 million richer. Cartier Bestiaire EVOLD on Phoenix Dark Purple Mother of Pearl, with diamonds feather dial ladies watch HPI 00633. Ellie was bewildered of the wristwatch's lengthy name. With a price tag of $178,000, it is said to be one of the most expensive timepieces in the world. "Madam, the watch is a gem in itself." The sales agent was making a hard time explaining the item. Made by a French luxury goods conglomerate, it was crafted with an 18-karat white gold case, with a white alligator leather strap. The fixed bezel is set with diamonds complemented by a dark purple mother of pearl, with diamonds feather dial attached with silver tone hands. We provide an added value to a purchased item, through a personalized engraved mark, perhaps a name. The lady is so excited of the commission she'll get out of this purchase. "You may inscribe my name on it," Ellie instructed the lady curtly. The seller was surprised, thinking that it will be a present to someone else, maybe a daughter. "That is a gift for myself. In Islam, women are allowed to wear makeup, jewelry, or perfume in public as long as it doesn't make them appear sexually attractive. The rule also applies to any kind of appearance or manner that may provoke sexual interest in anybody other than one's spouse. She deserved it. She's been working too hard, going through a lot of troubles. At least her effort in the last few months is giving her something that could change her lifestyle, and possibly temper her very orthodox viewpoint. Although she's brought up in America within a very liberal environment, her childhood and professional lives were spent mostly on dogmatic discourses. It's time to reward yourself." Her smile could not hide the contentment within. The Credit Suisse called her this morning, that the pharmaceutical company in the United States where she worked had deposited $75 million, converted into its equivalent value in Kuwaiti dinar, in her savings account. After an hour, another $25 million was credited to her current account. She simply replied, "The first one is our agreed professional fee based on contract, while the other one is intended for operational allowances in our experiments." A good news came in earlier before she went to bed last night. A fund manager called that a US-based tycoon deposited a $50 million in her offshore bank account in the Cayman Islands.
Thank you for watching. Write in the comments section for your request as to what book, usually from Project Gutenberg, you want us to feature in U-Book channel.
Click like to boost the rating of U-Book channel, make a comment for us for the improvement of our services, and share this video to your friends, with the copyright intact. Please click subscribe, and hit the bell button to be notified of new uploads from U-Book channel.